Never mind who you thought I was. I'm Rick James.
Arresting development tonight for the singer Rick James. Good evening, everybody. It's now 11 o'clock. He wasn't held for long. In fact, he's out. He's free again at this hour tonight.
Hey there. Ever wondered what went down with Rick James behind bars? Well, hold on to your seats because we're about to spill the beans. You've probably heard a bunch of stories floating around, but let's separate fact from fiction. The truth might just surprise you. All right, let's dive into the wild story of Johnson, born back in 1948 in Buffalo, New York. He came into this world as James Ambrose Johnson Jr., part of a big family with 7 siblings. Life wasn't easy from the start. His dad split when he was just 10, leaving his mom to hustle hard to keep things going. She danced with Katherine Dunham and did some shady stuff at night to put food on the table. When James hit his teens in 1964, he bolted to Toronto. But trouble found him quick. A bunch of drunk dudes tried to jump him outside a club. Lucky for him, some other guys swooped in to save the day, including Levon Helm, who was in a cool band. They invited James to jam with them that night, and he rocked the stage. To dodge the military, James went by the name Ricky James Matthews. That same year, he kicked off a band called the Mina Birds. They cooked up a mix of soul, folk, and rock music that had people buzzing. They even scored a deal with Columbia Records in Canada. But things weren't smooth sailing. Members came and went, including Neil Young, who joined after a fallout. They headed to Detroit to record with Motown, where James met his idols, Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder. When Wonder heard James's full name, he said, "Nah, too long. Shorten it to Ricky James." And just like that, the legend of Rick James was born. But trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg in this crazy tale. Now, back in 1966, there was a big fuss in Toronto. It was between James and Morley Shellman, who looked after a band called the Mina Birds. Turns out James was in trouble with the Navy, and Motown, the music company he was with, found out. They didn't want any trouble, so they stopped releasing James's songs. They convinced him to sort out his legal mess and come back to work with them. So, James gave himself up to the FBI and got with 5 months of hard work by the Navy. And get this, he was just 19. But James wasn't one to stick around. He escaped from Navy jail after only 6 weeks. He was on the run for another 6 months before surrendering again. Luckily, James had some help. His mom and his cousin, who later became a congressman, got him some legal backup. With their help, James got his cut down to just 5 months. After getting out of prison in 1967, he went back to Toronto, but got into trouble again, delaying his music plans. Fast forward to 1968, James was back at Motown, this time using the name Ricky Matthews. He was making songs for big acts like the Miracles and the Spinners. That's when he met Greg Reeves, who was tired of earning peanuts as a bass player. So he tagged along with James to Los Angeles. In LA, James crashed at Stephen Still's place and bumped into Jim Morrison, the famous Doors singer. Morrison played a mean trick on James, getting him to take acid. While in California, James and Reeves tried to make it big as a duo, but Reeves ended up joining Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, leaving James behind. Then there's the story about Sharon Tate's party in 1969. James missed it because of a hangover, and the next day, he found out Tate was Talk about a close call. Moving into the 70s, James was busy recording with different bands and even wrote a song that got picked up by the Chambers Brothers. He was all over the place, joining bands, recording albums, and living the rock and roll life. James's abuse began in his teens, first with he began using in the late 1960s. Although James claimed that he quit when he entered prison, his autopsy showed there was a small amount of the in his bloodstream at the time of his death. His use led to major health problems. In April 1984, he was hospitalized after being found unconscious at his house by a friend. In 1998, James suffered a stroke after a blood vessel ruptured in his neck during a concert at Mile High Stadium in Denver. Earlier that year, he had hip replacement surgery to repair bone damage from jumping around on stage and substance abuse.
You know, all the we did in the 80s and drinking has got to him.
By the 1990s, James's abuse was public knowledge. He was heavily addicted to and later admitted to spending about $7,000 per week on drugs for 5 years straight. On August 2, 1991, James and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi were arrested on charges of holding 24-year-old Frances Alley hostage for up to 6 days, tying her up, forcing her to perform SUL acts, and burning her legs and abdomen with the hot end of a crack coke pipe during a week-long coke binge. James faced a maximum sentence of life in prison if convicted on all charges, which included assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated mayhem, forcible copulation, false imprisonment, and K-napping. On November 3, 1992, while out on bail for that incident, James, under the influence of assaulted music executive Mary Sauger at the St. James Club and Hotel in West Hollywood. Sauger said she met James and Hijazi for a business meeting, but that the two then kidnapped and beat her over a 20-hour period. James was found guilty of both offenses, but was cleared of a torture charge that could have put him in prison for the rest of his life. While serving his 5-year sentence at Folsom Prison, James lost a civil suit to Sauger, who was awarded nearly $2 million in damages in 1994. James was ordered to pay her about $1 million. The hotel and a private security firm were found liable for nearly $750,000 in damages due to James was released from prison on August 21, 1996, after serving more than 2 years. In 1998, James was accused of SUally assaulting a 26-year-old woman, but the charges were later dropped. In 2020, his estate was sued for $50 million by a woman who accused him of her when she was 15 years old at a group home for troubled youths in Buffalo, New York, in 1979. The suit was later dismissed. Rick James once famously quipped, "Coke is a hell of a and boy did he know what he was talking about. But let me tell you, it's not just hell, it's a raging inferno." Back in 1980, Richard Pryor, the comedy legend, accidentally set himself on fire while messing around with coke. Yeah, you heard that right. Then, fast forward to 1990, and Rick James himself went up in flames in a wild crack mishap. And guess what? It all went down right after an MC Hammer concert. Now, here's where it gets really juicy. You see, Rick James and MC Hammer weren't exactly best buds. Hammer had taken a slice of James's hit song, Super Freak, and turned it into You Can't Touch This. It's like borrowing your buddy's car without asking and then decking it out with neon lights. But instead of throwing James did something unexpected. He actually got up on stage with Hammer. Picture this, Hammer his moves in those iconic parachute pants. And James, well, probably struggling for space on the stage. But that's not all. One night, James thought it would be a grand idea to try smoking crack rocks. I mean, who wouldn't want to light up a rock, right? Well, things didn't exactly go as planned. According to his dealer, Race Newman, James ended up setting a plate on fire while trying to torch some crack pipe leftovers. Can you imagine the scene? James, with his robe ablaze, casually strolling around like it's just another day in paradise. Newman had to leap into action, using a bedspread to put out the flames. And get this, James, still smoldering, acted like it was no big deal and just carried on like nothing happened. James signed with A&M Records, where his first single under the name Rick James, My Mama, was released in 1974, becoming a club hit in Europe. In 1976, James returned to Buffalo and formed the Stone City Band. Shortly thereafter, he recorded Get Up and Dance, his second single to be released. James and the Stone City Band signed a contract with Motown's Gordy Records imprint, where they began recording their first album in New York City. In April 1978, James released his debut solo album, Come Get It, which included the Stone City Band. The album launched the top 20 hit, You and I, which became his first #1 R&B hit. The album also included the hit single, Mary Jane. It eventually sold 2 million copies, launching James's musical career to stardom and helping out Motown Records at a time when label fortunes had dwindled. James's second album, Bustin' Out of L7, followed the previous album's success, eventually selling 1 million copies. A third album, Fire It Up, was released in late 1979, going gold. Around that same period, James launched his first headlining tour, the Fire It Up Tour, and agreed to invite the then upcoming artist, Prince, as well as singer Tina Marie, as his opening act. Following the end of the tour, James released the ballad-heavy Garden of Love, which became his fourth gold record. In 1981, James recorded his best-selling album to date, Street Songs, which, like his previous 4 albums, was a concept album. Street Songs featured a fusion mix of different genres, including rock and new wave, as well as James's brand of crossover funk, enabling James's own style of punk funk. The album featured hit singles such as Ghetto Life, the Tina Marie duet, Fire and Desire, Give It To Me Baby, and his biggest crossover hit to date, Super Freak, which peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 and sold over 1 million copies. Street Songs peaked at number 1 R&B and number 3 pop and sold over 3 million copies alone in the United States. Following that success, James released 2 more gold albums, 1982's Throwin' Down and 1983's Cold Blooded. During this period, when Prince also became a success as a producer of other acts, including The Time and Vanity 6, James launched the acts Process and the Do-Rags and the Mary Jane Girls, featuring his former background singer Joanne JoJo McDuffie as the lead vocalist and background performer, finding success with the latter group due to the hits All Night Long, Candyman, and In My House. In 1982, James produced The Temptations' top 10 R&B hit, Standing on the Top. In 1983, James recorded the hit duet, Ebony Eyes, with singer Smokey Robinson, as well as a ballad, Tell Me What You Want, with an introduction by Billy D. Williams. In 1985, James produced another hit for entertainer Eddie Murphy with the song Party All the Time. That same year, he appeared on an episode of The A-Team with Isaac Hayes. After the release of his 9th solo album, The Flag, in 1986, James signed with Warner Brothers Records, which released the album Wonderful in 1988, featuring the hit Lucy's Rap. James's controversial and provocative image became troublesome sometimes. Famous for promoting the use of live in concerts during a time that simple possession could lead to a long-term prison sentence, James was often threatened by cops in various cities that he would be arrested if he smoked marijuana on stage during performances of songs such as Fire It Up and Mary Jane. According to Kerry Gordy, most Motown executives erroneously thought the latter song was a simple, cute love song to a girl, not knowing the song was about James's overtly S-U-all bravado made it tough for him to be a bigger mainstream act. After the debut of the fledgling music video network MTV, James tried to present the music video to Super Freak to the label, only for the channel to turn the video down. James accused the network of racism. MTV denied this, stating the real reason Super Freak was turned down by MTV was because they felt James's video was too vulgar for the channel. When younger artists, such as Michael Jackson and Prince, found fame on the channel, James accused the 2 singers of being tokens in a 1983 interview, demanding that any black artist that has a video aired on MTV take their video off the channel in protest. James's rant was co-signed by David Bowie, who argued with MTV VJ Mark Goodman about the lack of black artists being featured on the channel, despite the successes of Jackson and Prince. When MTV and BET both avoided playing the video for Lucy's Rap because of its graphic SUL content, James considered the networks hypocritical in light of them still playing provocative videos by artists such as Madonna. James dropped his 11th album, Kickin', but it only hit the shelves in the UK. Then, things took a rough turn in 1990 when he lost his deal with Reprise. Warner Brothers. James was tangled up in personal and legal problems. But that year, MC Hammer's smash hit You Can't Touch This came out, and guess what? It borrowed a bit from James's tune, Super Freak. So, James and his buddy Alonzo Miller weren't too happy about it. They took Hammer to court, claiming they deserved credit for the song. And guess what? They won a Grammy for Best R&B Song in 1991. Fast forward to 1997, James made a comeback with his album Urban Rhapsody after doing some time in prison for assault. He hit the road to promote it and even spilled the beans about his life on VH1's Behind the Music in 1998. But then, bad luck struck again when he had a small stroke during a concert in '98. Yet he didn't let that stop him. You can't keep a good man down, right? He teamed up with Ike Turner for a song on the Chef Aid, the South Park album soundtrack in '98. And get this, Eddie Murphy himself invited James to join him in the movie Life in '99. Zoom ahead to early 2004, James made a surprise appearance on Chappelle's show. He and his buddy Charlie Murphy shared some wild tales from the '80s. It was pure comedy gold. During the skit, Dave Chappelle played James and delivered the iconic line, "I'm Rick James B." Oh, and don't forget the part about being a wild ride. That show was like a shot of adrenaline to James's career. He hit the road with Tina Marie and even rocked the stage at the BET Awards in June 2004. That was his last hurrah in the spotlight, but what a way to go out. He left the crowd cheering with his classic line, "Never mind who you thought I was, I'm Rick James, B." The man knew how to make an exit. James had a family life that was full of twists and turns. He had 2 kids, Tienza and Rick Jr., with Cyville Morgan, who used to sing and write songs.
Because Linda Blair is here, and she used to date Rick James. I know, citizens, I know you can't believe it. I couldn't believe it either. Linda, and you just said, first of all, I heard that Cold Blooded was about you. I would just love to know if that's true or not.
He said it was.
Now, let's talk about his love life. James dated Linda Blair, the actress, for a couple of years in the '80s. They met because Linda called him in an interview, which caught his attention. They hung out together at the Chateau Marmont in Hollywood for a bit, but things got complicated when Linda got pregnant. She decided to have an abortion without talking to James about it first. He felt really hurt and sad about it. He even wrote a song called Cold Blooded about how Linda made him feel. Later on, James met Tanya Hijazi at a party when she was just 17. They started dating in 1990 and had a kid named Tasman in 1993. But there were some rough patches too. Both James and Tanya ended up in jail for getting into with other people. Despite all that, they got married in 1996. But their marriage didn't last long, and they split up in 2002. James also had a special connection with Tina Marie, a singer he worked with. They even got engaged for a short while. They made music together for years, and their songs were loved by many. When James passed away, Tina Marie was heartbroken and struggled with addiction. So James Brown's life wasn't just about music. It was full of love, heartbreak, and unexpected twists, just like a real-life soap opera. Then tragedy happened on a morning in August 2004. Something shocking happened. James, a well-known guy, was found dead in his home in Los Angeles. He lived in a place called the Oakwood Toluca Hills. The place was just outside Burbank. James was 56 years old when he passed away. His caretaker found him, and it turned out he had died because his lungs and heart stopped working. It was all because of his health problems like diabetes, a stroke, a pacemaker, and a heart attack. But wait, there's more to the story. When they looked into his blood after he died, they found something surprising. James had different in his system, like Xanax and Coke. But even though he had these in him, the doctors said they weren't enough to K him. After James died, his fans got a chance to say goodbye. They had a big event for him where people could come and see him one last time. Then, they had a special funeral for him in Buffalo, New York. Lots of people showed up to say goodbye to James. They even had a free concert to remember him. In the end, they buried his ashes in a cemetery in Buffalo.